Welcome to the Be Your Soul podcast. I'm your host, Sky Bradshaw. This podcast is presented in 3 segments to support the energy of your authentic self. So be sure to tune in all the way to the last segment, where I will give helpful tips and tools on how to do the work. Today's topic is knowing the self, and our guest is Summer Estes of Embodied Intelligence. But first, let's tune in to a centered space to receive the unclouded heart segment of our show for spirit messages on today's topic of knowing the self. Allow yourself to come to a relaxed space, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, and in through your nose and out through your mouth. And as you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, allow your body to relax, 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 relax. Relax, 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 relax. Relax, 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 relax. And as we open up space to allow our body to relax, we invite the ancestors, loved ones, and friends to come together today to heal and guide us and lift us to the highest version of ourselves in the light of the universe, so we may hear what we need to hear, know what we need to know, connect how we need to connect, and be what we need to be for our highest and best good, and the highest and best good of all involved, as we open up space in knowing ourselves. One of my favorite things to tell people is to be your own best friend. Often we know what our friends need and like, or we tune in to when they are in stress or challenge and show up in ways for them that we may not show up to ourselves. It takes deep, honest looking at where you are in order to tune in to the you of now. Once we bring the awareness of this is where I am in this moment, we can accept where we are with grace and non-judgment. Have you tuned into yourself today, this week, this month? Have you asked yourself, how do I feel about that? Where do I stand? Have you told yourself that you're awesome or complimented yourself on a really great shoe choice? I'm sure it's difficult to turn inward and look at yourself as you look at others, because we're taught often that we are meant to sacrifice in order to love. But the truth is, love is compromise. Love is loving ourselves as well as loving others. We don't have to deem something as bad to know we want better when it comes to love. So we don't have to go into the pits of shame or guilt, regret or remorse, or self-punishment in order to know that we deserve balance, we deserve peace, we deserve growth, we deserve compassion for ourselves just as much as we give it to others. So I urge you to tune into yourself. Create a habit of asking yourself, how do I feel about this right now? Does this choice support the version of me that I see moving forward into the future? Give the space to understand the difference between patterns and learned behaviors, instead of tuning in to your authentic choice or choice and decision. By asking ourselves that original question, how do I feel about this right now? We build a relationship with ourselves that we are deserving of. By doing self-check-ins and paying attention to where you are in this moment in mind, body, and energy, we listen to ourselves and our needs in a way that we often put to the side as if self-sacrifice is noble. But the way I always look at it is, if you don't know where you are, you can't plan where you're going. So tuning in to the you of now in this moment and giving yourself space to just be present with yourself build the relationship with yourself. I promise you won't regret it.
You're listening to the Be Your Soul podcast with Sky Bradshaw. Coming up next, a conversation with psychotherapist Summer Estes about knowing oneself. Production of the Be Your Soul podcast is made possible in part by Island of Salvation Botanica. A visit to the Island of Salvation Botanica will enlighten you in the rich blend of culture and spiritual traditions that is New Orleans. The shop carries Vodou religious supplies, medicinal herbs, works of art, and more. It's considered to be one of the most authentic Vodou shops in New Orleans by locals and visitors alike. Located in a project co-developed by Sally Ann Glassman, the New Orleans Healing Center on St. Claude Avenue is only steps away from the French Quarter.
Welcome to the Skylights section of the Be Your Soul podcast. I am here today with Summer Estes and our producer Audrey to talk about knowing the self. Summer is a licensed psychotherapist, breath facilitator, Enneagram teacher, and coach, as well as the founder of Embodied Intelligence. She has been a friend and connection with me for a while, and I love her dearly. She has a special interest in deep inner work that integrates both perennial wisdom, somatic, and mindful practice in order to grow our emotional intelligence, sense of aliveness, and presence. And she is a beautiful soul on the planet. And I thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm just taking that in. Yeah. And what I'm just really aware of right now, just this warmth in my chest and seeing your face, even though it's through a computer, like I can still feel the felt quality of just warmth and care that I feel here in this space. So I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you for having me be a part. And I want to say too, I've been so inspired by you putting this out into the world and just putting yourself out there in this message.
Well, we are just listening to spirit and allowing the work to flow forward, which is what brought you here, because our last guest mentioned the Enneagram, and I was like, I know just the perfect next guest. So I love when things line up like that. So speaking of that knowing of yourself and knowing yourself in a way that allows for you to be that authentic, just like you spoke from your heart, what you're feeling right now. A lot of people in the past interviews who, when I asked the question, what it means to be your soul, had answered in a way that said they thought it was their authentic self woven into their presentation. And so what to you is being your authentic self? Like, what does that look like? You know, when you observe it or feel it, or you're so in tune with yourself, how do you stay in that authentic self space?
I think the clinical researcher, Brene Brown, she really was spot on when she said, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. And for me, this involves an active courage and willingness to trust. Like even in, preparing for this interview, there's this awareness of this part of me that wants to hit this out of the ballpark. Right. There's this concept of how this should go, right? And why is that? Because this part of me believes that I will have more value, if this goes out in a certain way, and this part of me that really wants to belong and have value, that it needs to look a certain way. So what I mean by trust and courage is when I'm allowing myself to really just open to what's here, like really open myself up and open my heart, open my body, and trust what's here and trust what's arising, because there is a dynamism about it. And to allow myself to open to this, there's this kind of trust dance that's happening.
Right.
And there's this, while I'm aware of kind of this sensation in my belly that's kind of a little nervous, there's also this aliveness that I really touch into. And this aliveness is, to me, it's just this dance with courage and trust of allowing it to unfold as it unfolds and to really be here. And so when I do this, there's a relaxing of, this, what I can sometimes that over preparation or this relaxing of this part of me that has some concept of what perfect is,
right,
and letting it go.
Releasing the idea that if we create perfection, then our life will be perfect, and realizing like perfection is that trust and faith. It is that perfect is a concept, allowing that feeling of, right now I have trust and faith that I am exactly where I'm meant to be in order to align into my future self in that way.
And the trust that I will be met.
Right. And valued just as you are, which, is so important, because, that critic in our head tries to tell us that when I finish this project, or I get that job, or I do that thing, then I will 100% be, I will have met the mark of perfection. I will have met the mark of what I'm meant to do, instead of realizing, I always tell people, if you're always looking into that future, I'm going to go to the grocery store, that future point, but you're not in this moment realizing, well, I'm not at the grocery store, and I need to write a list, and I need to get in my car, and I need to do a lot of things to get to the grocery store. And so if I'm not meeting myself right where I am in this moment, then I can't ever really accomplish those things that I see myself wanting to accomplish, because we're in that potential view instead of the actuality view. And the potential view gives us an unhealthy view of expectation, which says, when this, then that, instead of like, right now, I can accept where I am.
Yeah. We're back in the realm of concept.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when it comes to the Enneagram, how do you believe that it helps with that authentic self-definition?
It's a tool. The Enneagram is a tool for waking up. Mm-hmm. It's a map to our soul's flowering, and it is this tool that helps us notice when we have lost ourselves, when we have gotten fixated, and less of me is here.
So for people who don't know what the Enneagram is, we maybe should have started there, but that's okay. Can you give like your 5-minute elevator pitch on describing it?
Absolutely. I know. I always kind of laugh because it isn't, it's certainly not a quick sound bite.
Right.
However, there is, I'll just start with the basics. As the Enneagram itself, so there's the symbol, which is the circle, the triangle, and the hexad, and that is ancient. The Enneagram word is Greek, and it means, Ennea means 9 pointed, and gram means model or symbol. It is a symbol that is like a map of universal or natural processes and human nature that has been observed for thousands of years. However, what we're more familiar with today when we hear the Enneagram, I'm a type 1 or type 2, that's speaking more to really what's been more of a modern working for the last 60 years. And that is speaking more to those 9 points, 9 observable personality patterns or types we find in human nature. And that we have the capacity of all within us, but we do tend to find ourselves in one dominant type And it points to our strengths, our inherent gifts, as well as our challenges. And I would also say that it's incredibly precise in naming our core fears, our desires, our defensive patterns. And it's also a study of the automatic patterns and narrative stories we tell ourselves that take over our life when we're not present.
Mm-hmm.
I want to quote, because they've really stuck with me. My teacher, Russ Hudson with the Enneagram Institute, a lot of people can have a reaction of I'm not a type, and they can feel understandably like they're being put in a box, and I would want to have a reaction to that too. No one wants to be put into a box, but this is, Russ Hudson said this. He said the Enneagram does not put us into a box. Instead, it shows us the box we have put ourselves in and points us how to move out. And one other thing he said that really stuck with me is the Enneagram is not about fixing, right? We have these concepts, how we think we should be. So the Enneagram is not about fixing who we think we are. It's about inviting us into the palace of who we really are.
That's beautiful. And, one of the things I believe is that we are a soul before we are anything else, but we're also a human on the planet, right? And so if we ignore one or the other side of those things, then we're not embracing ourselves in a whole way. And so I think the Enneagram helps with the integration of, to me, this is, as a broad stroke experience with it, not very, knowledgeable, but I definitely feel like it's that tool that helps you integrate the two together, because there's that knowing yourself as a human and knowing your tendencies as a human, as well as like the soul aspect of that box, the container you were born into and how you work best with it.
I think that's well said. And there's this Rumi, he says, seek not love. Instead, I love that he says merely, like it's easy.
Right.
Merely seek the barriers we have built up against it.
Yes.
And because to me, the implication there is love is our greatest reality, and the soul knows this, right? Because it comes from this. And so the Enneagram is really helpful in noticing what those barriers are. It helps us begin to notice in ourselves those barriers that and not be, it's out of our survival. We all want to belong. We all have a survival pattern to want to belong, to survive. And so our egos develop this kind of structure, this pattern, right? And sometimes we can feel a little defensive. I don't have patterns, but to that part of us, I might just say, think about loved ones in your life and consider, do they have patterns of behavior that annoy you? And do they have patterns of behavior that you're really drawn to and you admire? And so absolutely, we have patterns of behavior. But the Enneagram is saying, it's inviting us to say, as human beings, we have been given these three centers of intelligence: the body or gut intelligence, the heart intelligence, and the intelligence of the mind. And it shows us how we typically use one or two. And it really invites us into embodied practice, how to live and expand our awareness and consciousness, and to really receive impressions from all three of these centers.
Yeah.
But when we get, fixated through survival patterns, through, scarcity or sense of fear, we tend to get more contracted or braced, and we're more in a reactive space. But, one thing I might say too, that of how I think about how can the Enneagram help us, and how does it help us with our being and living into more from this authenticity, this authentic self. There is this quote, Viktor Frankl, he was the father of existentialism, and he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And he said, in between stimulus and response, there is this space. And all healing begins with a pause. And he says it's in that space where our freedom lies. And to me, the Enneagram helps us see what those triggers are. Mm-hmm. And then it's through our opening, through practice, through intentional practice, embodied practice, that we can begin to pause and open that space, notice our judgment, notice our fear, and begin to bring in some curiosity. Oh, wow, I'm really freaking out here. Like the Enneagram says, we have three core human issues we all struggle with, no matter our type. How we self-forget. We forget we have a body and we receive impressions. We go up into the head. It's a survival pattern. And we have obsessive thinking. Mm-hmm. And we forget to actually use this intelligence that's with our body. And we self-deceive. We think we are the narratives we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we self-sabotage. We freak ourselves out and we stay small. Mm-hmm. We're not able to actually sense into this mystery and beauty of who we are. Sometimes we just get our soul, that voice gets crowded out and we're not able to hear it.
Right.
So it is a practice of pausing, being with our breath, coming back home to our body, and bringing in some curiosity to these patterns that are here.
Absolutely. So going along those lines, a tool in your toolbox that you feel like you really, use every day or couldn't live without, or, what would one thing you personally have to, say, this is a tool that I practice with every day?
Some type of embodied mindful practice, something that helps me notice, right, when I get fixated or kind of caught in my trance, right? I want to have some kind of practice. Again, we use the language mindfulness or embodied practice. I am not always the best at consistency and discipline. Mm-hmm. And so, but what I can say has been, is always here for me.
Right.
Is my breath. And what I mean by that is when I can be open and just become aware of my breath, because it's always here, right? Mm-hmm. I'm always breathing. And when I can become aware of my breath and let my heart be impacted by the intelligence and the natural rhythm of it. Mm-hmm. What do I mean by that? I'm taking in this inhale. I'm actually receiving this inhale. And in receiving my inhale, I am taking in nourishment, literally nourishment into my cells. Mm-hmm. And then my body exhales. And on the exhale, my body is letting go of what is no longer needed. And then here's the other beautiful part in this. One is that I'm not managing this. This isn't something I'm making happen. Right. I'm receiving. And as I release what's no longer needed, it's like the trees are taking in and they're filtering this byproduct and then releasing it back out to support the environment. So I just share this as when I really allow myself to open to this, I can beat myself up. Oh, I didn't do my practice today. But this single moment, when I really open my heart up to, I can feel the breath in my belly. Mm-hmm. And I can feel the subtle wave of it moving up through my chest and out my nose. And then it begins again.
And then everything becomes sacred. And that's what you're trying to get to, is that feeling of, the practice, everything becomes sacred, and that tuning in. And I think, as simple as that breath work is, it's complicated because we go into that distraction energy where we don't think. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, well, I just don't have time for practice. And it's like, oh, then you need more practice, because it is that not making space. Like, that's what's going to take you home. Your practice is what's going to take you home. And it can be as simple as that breath.
I was really touched by, we just finished up a pilot group I've been working with, Enneagram as a Path to Presence. In the last couple of weeks, we were sitting with what we're taking from our time together. And one of the lovely participants, she's a lovely 1, Enneagram 1. And Enneagram 1s, I'm married to a lovely 1. They can often feel this tremendous sense of responsibility. And they really can feel it like tension in their body. And the sense of, if it's going to be, I've got to make it right. And they just feel such responsibility. And she said, when I asked the question, what is one thing you want to take with you from this time? And what she said really touched me. She said, when I am aware of my senses and I allow myself just to be with my senses, I feel no longer alone. I feel a part of. It's like I'm no longer this orphan trying to figure it out on my own. I'm a part of.
That's beautiful.
And I was really touched by that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That is very beautiful. That space of holding space with everyone, knowing everyone is taking a breath right now. Everyone is breathing. That in itself can fill the spaces between us in that way. Is there anything else that you want to mention or bring forward about being authentic, being your true self?
Allowing myself to be where I am. I mean, for me, that's kind of a bottom line of, and again, it's recognizing when I'm, and I can't always get there. Sometimes I'm just kind of caught up in the swirl, but at some point, even if it's, with a good supportive friend or talking with, but I'm able to come back to some part and notice there's some way I'm resisting what is. Right. Not allowing myself to just be with what's here and to and that's where I'm actually able to be with myself and to meet myself. That's where my authenticity really emerges, is when I notice the resistance and then I'm able to just turn towards myself and befriend the part of me that's in resistance to how I'm actually showing up and what's here.
And because that's a part of you too. That's the part that we trip up on often as humans, where we believe if we accept right where we are right now, which is the resisting part as well as the aligning part, like both exist. If we accept that, it doesn't mean we're condoning that forever I'm going to get tripped up. It just means like right now I am bringing awareness to the fact both of these are a part of who I am. And, I always say you can't fix what you won't see. And so if we ignore that fact that, I'm living in that aspect instead of this aspect right now, if we just pretend like we are this thing that, never ever gets tripped up or never ever has doubt or never ever is lost, then we're not seeing our whole self and we're not able to tune into the way of saying, well, if I embrace the shadow and the light, if I look at myself as a whole being in whatever shows up in this moment, then that empowers me to be able to take choices and decisions, to make the different choices, make the different changes, like to turn change into growth, because it's there whether we look at it or not. Not looking at it doesn't make it go away. It just means, we've got a longer path to healing because we're refusing to acknowledge that might be a wound.
I loved what you said about embracing both the dark and the light. Our culture, and we spiritual bypass, we're all about the light, but we have such a harder time. We squirm around the darkness, right? It's like, okay, touched it, let's move on.
Right.
And I love, there's this poet, her name is Maya Luna, and she says, when I come down and in, all of a sudden, these problems are no longer really problems, but places of wild tenderness. And that when I come down and in, what I really find is myself. And I keep meeting myself here in this space. It's the secret desire among all desires. And I just love that because it's that turning towards what is here now and being with that.
I love that. So my 3 questions. The first one is, what do you think it means to be your soul?
Being my soul in my journey, what I notice is it's not something that I can grasp or make happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's often subtle. It's like this yearning part, right? That I follow this thread of this yearning part inside of me, this part of me that's looking for something, and I track it through what I'm drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
You were kind of saying in the beginning of this interview that our soul is here first, right? But that our soul receives, it comes in and it receives impressions. But there's something that I recognize in being in my soul. It's really this invitation of trusting and allowing this part of me that is touched and knows that there's something more that is below the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And really listening to that. And again, that listening, that attuning to it can come in different forms and different ways. So there is a fluidity and a dynamism about it as well.
So what's one thing that you do in your practice that you do no matter what? Like it's the thing you don't skip? Food source you need every day, like as far as an energetic food source that you take in every day?
I work with this practice called inquiry, and it's kind of opening to my body, heart, and mind, and just checking in felt impressions. It can start with sensations in the body, felt impressions, but I'm not always consistent with that. So if I really want to stay in integrity here, the one thing, it really is the sacredness of just remembering my breath. And that's something that it's like I can feel this anchor in my belly, and it's this reminder that I am held, that I'm a part of something that is so creative and intelligent, and I'm a part of it. There's this one quote, I can't remember the person who said it, but he said, breath is where spirit and matter merge.
Ooh, I like that.
And so my breath is always with me.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, it is like an anchor for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say that's the one thing is I breathe.
So in that idea of that centered balance, like the breath work taking you home, if you could describe that to somebody, what home in the self feels like, or what that does for your life, maybe like what's the value of being able to pay attention to your breath work and being home and centered.
Well, I'll say in words, and then I'll give a kind of a description of how it feels in my body.
Sure.
For me, when I feel centered and balanced, what I notice is there's this freedom that's happening. Like there's this receptivity within me that's happening. And it's allowing me to be here now and meet myself where I am, right? So it's accessible. And so I can become aware of it. I'm judging myself, and I can begin to feel the tenseness in my body and the braceness in my body. And then I become aware of my breath and my belly, and I just start staying with it. And sometimes I just have to stay in the chaos for a little while, and I just breathe with it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes what I notice, like when I really feel in this attuned, centered place, what it often feels like inside my body, if you've ever been to like a science center, or maybe you've seen them in the ocean, but a jellyfish and the way it is in water, and the way like I literally can feel it when I'm in this centered space in my chest, in my belly. It feels like kind of this slow, receptive pace that's receptive to the current, right? Jellyfish, they're receptive to the current. And so there's this trusting relationship that's happening with the current and the jellyfish. And there's a way in my body that I feel open, relaxed, trusting with my environment. And there's this attuneness that's receiving, myself, receiving impressions, and I feel open. And here's the and. I'm not alone. There is a real awareness of withness, like co-creativeness and being held in.
Yeah, and the interconnectedness, because that part of that fluidity and the being able to move with the motions of things means there's other things in motion, right? And so, by taking
exactly.
By taking that in as like, instead of fighting against, we look at like, what am I striving for? And how does that adaptability, flexibility, connectivity all come into play in my forward motion, in my being present, in my understanding, I am not alone.
And I just want to say for anyone listening, because sometimes, we can recognize that's really hard. That is not easy.
Yeah.
For many of us, it's not. And really, as much as you're able, bring some real compassion that there, there's an intelligence behind our resistance, because again, we're hardwired to survive and to belong. And so again, I think the Enneagram, when it's used correctly, can invite us into seeing the truth. It's not going to sugarcoat things, but it invites a real compassion,
a sense of grace,
to see that's right. That's exactly the nature of these maladaptive structures, right? These, we can call them resistances, or ways that create patterns that maybe we don't like in ourselves, that they got formed out of innocence, and they got formed from a place of survival.
Right.
And so as we begin to really look at, why is it's hard for me to trust? Why is there so much resistance? As much as we can, to turn towards that part first with trust that this was an intelligence that we needed for a period of time. But now there's something in me. What is that thing that's in me that's inviting me to more?
Right. The way that I address that, the way that I offer to other people to address it, is to thank the energy, like thank the lesson, thank that thing that we needed in that survival moment. Thank you for taking care of me at one point in my life, but now I no longer need that tool, or I no longer, I don't need that survival mechanism to be omnipresent. And I release it back to the space and place from which it came, because it did serve a purpose to us at some point. And if we shove it in denial or claim it as bad, then we're also talking about a part of ourselves, like embracing the shadow and the light. Thank you, survival technique. Thank you, habitual habit, the habit of, that survival technique. Thank you for what you did for me when I needed you, but now I no longer need you. So I let you go back to the space and place from which you came. And it's that freeingness, that grace that you were talking about, that gives us the idea of like, it had a purpose. That purpose no longer exists in our world. So we release it back to the space when it had purpose. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been really amazing. So is there anything that you want to, any classes coming up, any things coming forward, June, July, August, or beyond?
Yeah. So with my kids at home in the summer, I often take the summer off from doing events. But in the fall, if we go to my website, embodied-intelligence.com, in September, I'm accepting, you can get on the list. I'm opening up, I'm going to have an online option and a local in-person option for Enneagram as a path to presence, where we explore more about type. We explore really what it's about and how we can use it to have more meaning in our lives, emotional intelligence, and just be of support. It's so helpful in this journey. We need community, and we need the support of each other and that interconnectedness.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and I love whenever I get to be with you, Sky.
Same.
Stay tuned for That's What Sky Says, the part of our podcast where Sky shares tools and tips to help you use today's topic of knowing oneself in your daily life. Production of the Be Your Soul podcast is made possible in part by Emerge Skin and Soul, located at 2002 North Elm Street in Greensboro, North Carolina. Emerge Skin and Soul is so much more than just skincare, because you are so much more than just your skin. Emerge believes in offering a skin-to-soul experience, working hand in hand with you to achieve your skincare and self-care goals from the inside out. Offering massage, Reiki, and customized skincare plans, coupled with holistic modalities that bring skin, heart, and whole body into balance and harmony. Visit emergeskinandsoul.com today to learn more and to book your appointment.
In this segment, I offer tools and guidance that I have found helpful in my practice, and maybe you will too. Today, we're going to work on my absolute favorite go-to tool for your toolbox, the 3-5s meditation. Spirit gifted me this technique long ago when I first began teaching about the energy of the soul self. I've seen many success stories from those who have engaged in this work, and I'm happy to pass it along to you. The 3-5s technique is a meditation that helps you support alignment and recognition of the individual parts of the whole self. It is called the 3-5s because it's suggested to do it 3 times a day for 5 minutes each time for 21 days. By doing this consistent, persistent work, it allows you to expand the energy of the empath and the intuitive self by building trust and opening up awarenesses of the different ways that our mind, body, and spirit speak to us. The reason we do it 3 times a day for 5 minutes each time for 21 days is to create a habit energy within the trilogy bodies system. Oftentimes, as the empath or the intuitive, we struggle staying in our center self and our own organic energy. We can oversense energies or create a sense of ownership instead of observance with energies we encounter. This practice will help you observe other people's energies, feel them, and tune in with them without the impulse to absorb them. We train our energy to observe, not absorb. This exercise supports building self-trust by giving ourselves attention, deep listening, compassion, and understanding. This formulates a knowing of the self that is rooted in meeting ourselves exactly where we are without judgment. The 3-5s meditation helps build self-trust by taking that dedicated time each day to just bring awareness to where you are in this moment. Just bring ourselves home to ourselves and allow that attention and communication within ourselves. That self-understanding builds healthy self-communication, which in turn builds self-worth, which builds self-trust, which allows us to expand into greater places of the self because we have that active listening present. That creates the support system for the energetic, intuitive, mental, emotional, and physical parts of the self to communicate without distress or discord. When this process is done for 21 days, we create the habit of listening and trusting the different parts of the self. We no longer have to guess if it's my monkey mind or my emotions. Is it my emotions or my intuition? Is it my intuition or my energy? Is that my energy or someone else's energy? We just know because we've built the skill set through understanding and knowledge of each part of the self and how it communicates. We are able to see ourselves and hear ourselves and know ourselves deeply and truly. This is a base tool I use in almost every workshop I teach. The first thing the class does is to get familiar with themselves before moving into healing and growth. That way, we have a sturdy foundation to build from. So let's get started on the 3-5s meditation. Start by breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. and getting yourself in a relaxed space. Opening up your energies to the ancestors, loved ones, and friends to come together today to heal and guide you and lift you to the highest version of yourself in the light of the universe, so you can hear what you need to hear, know what you need to know, connect how you need to connect, and be what you need to be for your highest and best good and the highest and best good of all involved. And as you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, allowing yourself to come into a space of peaceful awareness, allowing yourself to tune in to your center self with each breath. We first bring awareness to our physical body. Just tune in to where your physical body is in this moment. Are there any tensions? Is anything tight or loose? And instead of telling the story of why this exists in your physical being, just allow it to be. Bring awareness to it and allow the thoughts about it to fade away. And take a neutral centering breath as we move into the next awareness, the thoughts. We cannot control thoughts or emotions from happening, but we can control how we interact with them. So as your mind tries to chase the racing thoughts, envision them like bubbles, moving up and away and popping as the universe takes them from you, transmuting. And then we take a neutralizing breath to bring awareness to our emotions. How do you feel right now? We don't have to tell a story about our feelings or create a pathway to them. We just want to bring awareness to them existing as we allow them to move up and through us with non-attachment. And then we take another neutralizing breath as we move into our energy system, tuning into your chakras if you know them, or just your energy in general. Is anything hotter or colder, expansive or compressive? And we're not trying to heal that right now. We're just bringing awareness to it. We may want to come back to it at another point in time, but we're just listening to our energy. And then we take another neutralizing breath, allowing us to move into our intuitions, the three intuitions: fight, freeze, or fawn, our sense of knowing, and prophecy. And just recognizing that these three intuitions always exist, but sometimes one can be heard more than the other, or maybe we've trained ourselves to listen to only one. And by bringing this awareness that all three exist within us, and openness to any message, we can fortify our relationship to them. Remember, we don't want to try and create the story of the intuitive ping. We just want to pause, bringing awareness to it, and we can later reflect and reconnect with it. And then we tune in one more centering breath to other energies. These can be other people in the room, in the neighborhood, higher beings, ancestors, any other energy that does not originate within ourselves. We're just bringing awareness to it, observing it without absorbing it, giving ourselves permission to realize that our energy and this energy exists within the same space, but does not have to mold into one. And then we just move into another neutralizing breath, coming back to center, taking 3 breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth, allowing the mind, body, and energy to come together as one, more aware, more in tune, more connected. And as you feel yourself sitting there, you can come back to conscious awareness, back to yourself. Having done these 3 check-ins for 5 minutes, 21 days, it will bring you to a place of knowing the self that your heart may be desiring. I suggest you build this into your daily practice. And as I like to remind people, it may sound like a lot of time. 5 minutes, 3 times a day for 21 days. But remember, your energy has patterned in the position that it is after years of habitual behavior. So by giving yourself this attention that you deserve, then you can restructure those habits to a place of knowing the self and coming to your center in a healthy way. Don't forget, Patreon members not only get early access listening, but a PDF worksheet of each episode's exercise for as little as $9 a month. So if you'd like this written out for you, then you can check it out on our Patreon at patreon.com/beyoursoulsky. And as always, there are links on our website. You can also find this meditation on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in going deeper into your energy self, then you can find links to our virtual classroom on our website as well. We hope that this has spoken to you in a way where you feel inspired to become your own best friend. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Be Your Soul podcast. We hope you'll like, follow, and share your thoughts on your podcast platform and spread the word about our new podcast with your family and friends. This podcast is published on the 2nd and 4th Fridays of each month, but you can stay connected with Sky in between episodes. Visit Be Your Soul Sky if you're on Facebook. It's Be Your Soul Podcast on Instagram, and there's more information at our website, beyoursoul.org. This podcast is produced at Muddy Creek Studios.